Hi, I'm Mistress J, and these are your Commerce Exam Nuggets. Lesson 2, Production. Before we begin, I would like you to get a pen or a pencil, a notebook or a device to record in, and of course, your thinking cap. Let's look at our objectives for today. Our first objective is to define production. Then our second objective is to look at the 4 categories of production. Now think about everything that you have, everything that you need, that you want. All of it comes from raw materials from nature. Because of that, commerce cannot exist without production. So let's think about it. What is production? Yes, that's exactly what I thought. Production is the process of converting raw materials into goods or services that satisfy human needs and wants. And here are your keywords. There are 3 main categories of production. Primary, where we gather all the raw materials. Secondary, where we convert those raw materials into goods. And tertiary, where we provide services to allow those goods to be sold. All of them are linked and connected. Did you know there's a 4th category, quaternary industries? And these are your intellectual services, research, development, and information. Now, guess what? It's quiz time. Let's recap quickly. What is production? Look at your keywords and try to remember the definition. That's correct. Now, look at the 4 pictures and try to remember the 4 categories of production. That's also correct. Great job.
Today, our lesson will be on the electoral reform and preparation for a general election. So last class, we would have learned about government dissolve. We would have also learned about election day. And of course, just to recap a little bit, when we talk about government dissolve, that pretty much means that the government will no longer function as an active or working government. It will be null and void, and the government or the officials will then start to prepare for a new or an upcoming general election. All right, we also talked about election day being announced. Once the government is dissolved, which is usually done by the Governor General, then the election day under the advice of the Prime Minister will be announced. And during this time, once it's announced, it's about 35 to 45 days period, when the political parties would then try to start their whole process of preparing for the general election. One of the main or one of the biggest key points that we must remember would be that we have nomination day. Now, nomination day, as we would have learned in our last lesson, is a day when members or persons who wish to offer themselves to run in a general election would then appear before officials to give documents and to make sure that they are eligible to run in a general election and to be in charge or to represent a constituency. So today, we are going to look at campaign. campaign, which is usually a huge deal when it comes to a general election. Now, electoral reform is what we are going to focus on today. And at the end of this lesson, students should be able to define and review key related terms, explain the function and formation of political parties in the Bahamas, list qualifications necessary for a person to become a candidate, and of course, number 4, outline steps involved in preparation for elections. So we have a full period today where we're going to review these objectives. You would need The Making of the Bahamas, rather, by John Berryman, or J. Berryman, and this lesson starts on page 81, Election to the House of Assembly. I would suggest you use a highlighter in case you want to highlight those important points that you would want to review. You would also need a notebook and a pen in case you want to jot down a few important terms or nuggets for you to review later. Now, let me just remind you, students, that this is a live session, but we do have this PowerPoint and other resource materials available on the website. So all you would have to do is to go and log on and download the information, and you can watch the PowerPoint over and over again if you need to review some more. But I should say read the PowerPoint. And the worksheets that are available, they would be good practice tools as well. And of course, if you have the Bahamas, which is the text that I'm using for reference, you may also do some private reading in your own private time. It will all be beneficial and will all help you. If you have a past paper from the Ministry of Education, one of those past BJC papers, you may look at some of the multiple choice questions, and you should look at the ones that specifically deals with the election process and attempt to answer those. Also, you may want to look at the structured questions in the back in section D and see if the questions relate, any of the questions relate to the election process. And maybe you can also attempt to answer those questions. All right. And of course, what you can also do is create some questions on your own so that you are able to then go and research those questions and answer. All right. So let's continue. All right. Let's get started. I think we are well on our way. All right, so before you, we have some definitions. You want to say the words out loud, and then you and I will read the definitions together. All right? So let's look at the first definition. This definition is about what? Now, let me tell you what the actual definition says. The process of choosing somebody or of being chosen by to vote. What exactly is this definition talking about? Well, if you guess election, then you are correct. The next word is general election. General election. Now, general election is an election in which the citizens of a country or state vote to elect representatives of most or all constituencies to a legislative body. That's the meaning of the word general election. Our next word, even though it disappeared before me, is secret ballot. Secret ballot. Now you're going to be hearing us talk about secret ballot pretty much throughout our next lesson when we actually review election. So secret ballot is casting votes secretly in order to demonstrate, or sorry, to determine the outcome of an election or some other decision. And so when we talk about secret ballots, we are going to learn in our next lesson, but you're going to hear this word today, that it's pretty much just a private way of voting where nobody is supposed to know who you are voting for. All right, that's a common practice in our general elections. Enumeration. Enumeration. Now this is to put a voter's name on an official list, which is used for election, okay? So this is when we actually, once you have been registered to vote, your name now goes on official register. And that means that Mary Sue or John Doe has officially registered to vote in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And now they are ready to appear at the polling stations on election day. Indelible ink. Now, this is the ink used during an election as proof that a person has voted. It stays on for at least 24 hours. All right, so you might wonder, why do we have to use indelible ink? Well, the answer for that is quite simple. In the Bahamas at present, we are only allowed to vote once, and you're only allowed to vote in one constituency. So when you would enter the polling station on polling day, which we'll talk about later, before you actually start the actual writing on the secret ballot, the officials would then dip your finger in what we call indelible ink, and it's usually your thumb. And once you put it in and you show that it is proof that you have voted. So you won't be able to now go to another constituency and vote for somebody else, because they would then see that you have ink on your finger. All right? It lasts for about 24 hours. I know sometimes people try to take it off with bleach and all these other stuff, but there would still be some remnants or some ink left on the hand, on the finger. So the finger will not be completely clean of the ink until after 24 hours. Okay, the next term is by-election. Election held between official, this is pretty much during a general election, or sometimes it may not even be a general election, when a seat is vacant, all right? So you have to then replace that seat with somebody else. Now, just in case you're trying to figure out, well, Ms. Monker, how does a seat become vacant? Well, if a member of parliament dies or resigns, or maybe during a general election, if there's a tie in the constituency, then we would have election, meaning that it's that for that constituency only, we would have to run that election again. And so either we would break the tie, or we would have to name a new person to be the candidate and to run and hopefully win the seat. Okay, so that's what we call a by-election. Yeah, so long, bye-bye, they're gone. So just think about by meanings to go. All right, let's look at presiding officer. Now, a presiding officer is in charge of the entire electoral constituency. And we're going to talk about constituencies a little bit later. But this is the person that is the boss when it comes to the electoral process to ensure everything is going right Everything is being done in accordance to the law. Everything is being done fairly. Polling day. Polling day is another name given to a general election. And of course, a general election is pretty much when the entire country goes on shutdown mode and we have to go to the polls and vote in the persons of our choice who we wish to represent us during a general election. Gerrymandering. Now, this is a very uncommon term, but it's a term that is actually very important when it comes to general election processes. Gerrymandering is the manipulation or to manipulate an electoral area, usually by altering its boundaries in order to gain an unfair political advantage in a general election. So to break it down or to further explain it, it pretty much means that you're cheating. You are cheating the system to gain votes in your favor because you know that the majority of people live in a certain area and may be of a certain political persuasion. And so in order for you to win that seat, you may shift the boundaries a little, or maybe even a lot, or change them so that you would gain favor. And of course, remember, when it comes down to general election, the person that wins the most vote in that constituency is named the Member of Parliament. And if we were to go back in history, we will remember this term gerrymandering when there was a big problem in the House of Assembly with the PLP, which is the Progressive Liberal Party, and the UBP, okay, United Bahamian Party, when it was found out that gerrymandering was happening during that time. Now, we're going to give you a flashback in time in a few minutes so that we can review some of these things, but I want you to remember that word, gerrymandering, okay? The next word or definition we're going to look at is constituencies, or a constituency. The areas in which a country is divided for election purposes and from which a representative is elected to serve in a legislative body. So in a nutshell, or to break it down even further, we would then say constituency is a place where people live who are eligible to vote. They are parted off or they are in boundaries so that each constituency would have a leader or a representative. The next word is returning officer. A returning officer, this is the officer in charge of individual polling stations. All right, this is the person who's in charge of the actual polling station that persons may have to go to vote in a general election. This job description is very much different from what we spoke about before in terms of the constituency and being in charge of the entire process. This individual is only in charge of that particular polling station. And the next word we're going to look at is nomination day. Now, this is the day when all candidates of each party submit their names and must pay a deposit to the constituency office. Without nomination day, we won't have a general election. So nomination day is our first step after the dissolution of Parliament to ensure that the country will have a general election. Now, remember, I did promise you we're going to do a little flashback from the past just to keep your mind going. And just for you to know, this is general knowledge information that you would need to know in order to understand our present, okay? So, historic election of 1962 initiated change and set the pace for every election that followed. it was during this election, the following changes were made. Remember that year, 1962. The first change that was made was all Bahamians voted on the same day. So a general election like we know now, we are voting on the same day. Now we do have where there is a day designated prior to the general election for officials and other persons to vote, but it's not that time as yet. All right, let's continue on. Number 2, women voted for the first time. Women voted for the first time. Now, you may ask, well, Ms. Monker, I thought a general election was for everyone. Yeah, it's definitely for everyone. But prior to 1962, women were not allowed to vote. Number 3, plural voting was considered illegal. Remember when we first spoke about, when we look at the definitions, and we talked about the indelible ink and how that is a symbol, or it's used to justify that you voted so that you don't vote again, because now during election times, voting is illegal. Voting twice is illegal. So prior to 1962, you were able to have multiple votes. So you can go to whatever constituency and vote, and then go to another one and vote again, then go to another one and vote again. But now it's illegal since 1962. I tell you, 1962 is a very awesome year when a lot of things changed in this country as it relates to electoral reform. So you need to remember 1962. All right, let's see what else we learned or we know about this. Okay, and number 4, election was contested along party lines. Okay, so if there was some reason why a party or a constituency may feel that something was not done that is subject to the law, or maybe some unfair, or as we call it in our Bahamian lingo, some shady business happening, since 1962, we now have the right to actually put it before the courts and allow the justice system to prevail. And it is contested along party lines, meaning the political parties, okay? Now there's a picture that I'm showing you online. And many of you may not know her or may not know her role when it comes to our history, but since we are flashing back in time, name is Ruby Ann Cooper Darling, and she is the first woman to be registered to vote in 1962. All right, so remember 1962, remember some of these changes that occur, and remember the name Ruby Ann Cooper Darling, who was the first woman to be registered to vote. The picture that you would see now is actually a demonstration. And you would see Sir Milo Butler, the late Sir Milo Butler, and the late Sir Lyndon Pinlin, who were actually demonstrating. And if you remember in our definitions, when we talk about the boundary lines and it being fair or unfair, and you are not, back then, what they did was they protested. And one of the placards that is being shown is PLP uncovers UBP plot. And that plot was in reference to gerrymandering. Remember, we spoke about what gerrymandering was. All right, so remember 1962, and remember some of the changes that occurred as the result. And also remember the name of Ruby Ann Cooper Darling, who was the first woman to be registered to vote. Okay, now if you want to do further reading on it, then you will want to read the events of Black Tuesday and see how that ties into electoral reform, and it will help you out greatly. Also, read up on majority rule. Okay, so read up on majority rule and tie both together, and it would help you to further understand the significance of 1962, the significance of the changes that happened, and of course, the changes that occurred during this whole historic year. Okay, let's continue on. Right, so I'm feeling election fever now that I see all of these political parties on the screen. So a political party, first of all, is a group of people who come together with similar ideas to try and run the country the way they think is best. Okay, so presently in the Bahamas now, we've had many political parties, and we've also had persons that run independently. But as it stands, based on this lesson today, we're only going to focus on 3 of these political parties. The PLP, which was formed in 1953, and this is actually the first political party to be formed officially. And you have the Free National Movement, which was formed in 1970. And we also have the DNA, Democratic National Alliance, formed in 2011, right? Pay close attention to these names and pay close attention to the dates when they were formed. Let's continue. So we want to look now at qualifications for becoming a member of parliament. Maybe that's one of your endeavors when you finish school, finish college. Maybe this is something that you may want to do. We do need upcoming new members of parliament that will bring change to the Bahamas, and maybe that may be you. So let's look at what you need to do in order to become a member of parliament. And just in case you don't know where that is, the picture you're seeing now is a picture of Parliament, of the House of Assembly. And the House of Assembly is elected House of Parliament and is located in Rawson Square, Bay Street. So one of the first things that we need to look at being a member of parliament is, number one, you must be a Bahamian citizen. Number two, you must be of sound mind for obvious reasons. Number three, you must have a clean police record. So if this is something that you want to do, then do not get in any trouble and cause your police record to be unclean. Number four, you must declare all assets. We spoke about that in our last lesson. Declaring assets does pretty much mean you're actually showing or telling the general public what you have and what you owe. All right? Number five, you must be 21 years or older. So some of you have a few more years to be groomed, and to make sure this is exactly what you want to do. So this is, start thinking about ideas now. Start looking at the country as a whole. Start to think about what are some of the changes that you would want to see or what you would want put in place that will not just benefit you and your house or you and your island, but will benefit the Bahamas as a whole. Number six, you must be ratified by a justice of the peace. Remember, when you were to bring your information to the returning officer, it has to be signed by a justice of the peace. meaning everything that you say are on those documents or in those documents are true. And number 7, you must submit $400 to the returning officer. We spoke about that during our last lesson. Remember that $400 is important. If you win a percentage of your seat, then you would get your $400 back. And of course, if you don't win 1/6 of your seat or the voting population in the constituency that you're running for, then that money will not be returned to you. It will go to the Treasury. And so you have to make sure that if you decide that you want to run for the member of Parliament for your constituency in a few years, then you need to start understanding the whole process. And so you will have a smooth sailing when you decide to officially make that decision. Okay? Let's continue on. Parliamentary registration. All right, so once a general election has been announced, it is the responsibility of the Parliamentary Registration Office to ensure that every eligible Bahamian is registered to vote. And sometimes you'll be like, well, Ms. Monka, how would they know if I vote or not? Well, the truth in the matter is we don't know exactly who will vote and who won't vote. But what we do know is the information will be out there. Sometimes it's via social media. There may be advertisements on television. There may be persons walking door to door to speak to you about if you have been registered to vote. And then what also happens is there are different satellite stations or different areas where persons are able to register to vote. That's usually in their constituency or not too far from it. Okay, so the Parliamentary Registration Office is responsible to ensuring that that information gets out there. You know when registration opens and you know when registration closes. And persons are made available usually during working hours to register to vote. And as you can see on your screen, we have 1 or 2 little ads that I was able to download for you. If you don't vote, then you really don't have any voice. So what's the purpose of talking, trying to make decision and say how better the country could be if you are an eligible voter, but you didn't vote? So this is why it's very important. It's a duty as Bahamian citizens to ensure that we vote. And voting in a general elections, as I said before, it brings about changes. And some of these changes, most of these changes are for the best. And in fact, I would say, I will go on a limb and say all of the changes are for the best, even though some of them may not be as popular as others. It is still for the best when it comes to the Bahamian people, all right? And usually when there is a period of voting, there would be a broadcast that says it is open. The registration offices are open and they're located at this point or that point, and you can go and bring your ID, your passport, your national insurance card, and so that you would be able to vote. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on in this session. Let's continue. Qualifications necessary for voting in the Bahamas. Now, we spoke about voting, but remember, you got to be eligible. You have to be eligible to vote. First, you must be at least 18 years or older. We want to make sure you're mature because it's a very adult decision you're making when you decide to vote. You must be a Bahamian citizen because it will benefit all of us. You must be registered to vote in a constituency in which you live. And just to explain to you, you have to have been living in that constituency at least 3 months prior. So you can't just move in a constituency today and decide you're going to vote. No, you have to be living in that constituency at least 3 months in order to vote in that constituency. You must be of sound mind. So we don't want crazy people voting, all right? So you have to be sane because it's a very important decision. And you must not be imprisoned or under a death sentence. And so if you are arrested and you are confined to Her Majesty's prison, then you will not be eligible to vote. All right, let me just clarify being of sound mind. Being of sound mind just simply means that you are able and you understand what you are doing and you're able to do it. Okay, so that's pretty much what that entails. Let's continue. Enumeration. Now, enumeration is a term given when a voter's name is placed on the official register for voting. I spoke about this earlier. This is one of our definitions. And it pretty much means that once you have finished registering to vote, they would give you a registration card and your name would then be placed on an official register to say, John Doe have already officially registered to vote. Let's continue. Boundary Commission. The Boundary Commission is an independent public body that is set up by Parliament to review constituency boundaries. Remember, we talked about what constituencies are, and when it comes to the Boundary Commission, we have an independent body of people that actually overlook these boundaries to ensure that the process is fair, it's needed. Maybe a constituency have overgrown or have the population have been enlarged, maybe because of a new community of people that have recently moved in the area. And maybe this was not the case in the prior election. And so maybe there may be a need to now divide that boundary into two, as opposed to it being one constituency. So decisions like this would be decisions made by the Boundary Commission. And of course, one of the biggest job is to avoid gerrymandering. And that's why we said it's an independent body. So it's not based on a political party. So to avoid, remember, gerrymandering is fixing the boundaries. Now, boundaries will have to be changed from time to time, but it does not necessarily mean that it's a set fix. It just is, it may be fixed based on population, or maybe a new road or new community have moved in a particular area where they wasn't or weren't before prior to the last general election. So a boundary commission is very, very important. It's very vital. It's very useful. It's very needful. And most importantly, it works in conjunction with the government for the people. All right, let's continue. Oh, one thing I wanted to note, and I think I noted this in our last lesson, New Providence being the largest, having the most constituencies because of it having the largest population. Now, a question that I get a whole lot in classes would be, well, if Andros is the largest island, how come, or how is it that New Providence have the most constituencies? Well, the answer to that is simple. Even though Andros is the largest island in the Bahamas, it do not have the amount of population as New Providence. And so with New Providence having the most population and is relatively one of the smaller islands in the Bahamas, we have to make sure that the constituencies are fair and everybody have an opportunity to vote. In the Bahamas at present, sorry, in New Providence at present, we have about 24 constituencies. I hope I right. I think I right. And in Andros, there is 2. So that should tell you the population in comparison. All right, let's continue. So again, let's go back to what is a constituency. A constituency is the voting areas in which the country is divided. These areas are defined by Parliament. All right, so it's legislated, it's law. So you can't just decide, oh, I want to be in this constituency or I want to be in that constituency. No, it's where your house or your living area is located within a boundary. The picture on the slide actually shows the 24 constituencies that make up New Providence itself. And as you can see, Killarney is the largest constituency. But does that mean Killarney has the largest voting population? No, it doesn't. It just means the land area of Killarney is larger than the others. But Killarney do not have the largest voting population, all right? And if you would look at the map of the Bahamas, maybe that's a good thing to do a comparison. Look at the map of New Providence, and you can do the comparison, and you can see the land area in conjunction with the constituency. So the land area or the constituency size really doesn't have anything much to do with it having the most or the largest amount of voters. Let's continue. Okay, we're moving along really quickly. It's activity time. So it's time for us to put on our thinking caps. I hope you guys are ready. This is usually the fun time of these. All right, so let's go to our first activity. And it's called Who Am I? I'm giving you a few minutes to answer, but I have the answers already done and you're just going to be able to check them. All right, so let's look at the questions 1 through 3. And you are now going to write the answer down somewhere on your notepad, your book. And you don't have to write the question, just write the answer because it'll actually help us to go through it really quick. And question number 1, I am a person who lives in a constituency. Who am I? So I need the name of a person who lives in a constituency. Number 2, I received documents from candidates on nomination day. Who am I? Number 3, I am a person who will be contesting a seat in an upcoming general election. Who am I? Okay, so real quick, let's go through the answers. Constituent would be your answer for number 1. Returning officer will be your answer for number 2. And candidate will be your answer for number 3. Time's going. We have time for just maybe one more question. Let's go. Name the event. Now, this is almost like a riddle. People are gathered with shouts and cheers, holding pom-poms without fear. What is this event? Let's look at question number 2. They come around knocking on doors, giving out gifts with the hope of making new laws. What is this event? And number 3, it is official after this day. I will work hard to win. No time to play. What is this event? Let's check our answers quickly. Rally. People, shouts, cheers, pom-poms. You got it? Okay, Number two, a walkabout, or what we call campaigning, when persons go from door to door representing political parties and asking you to vote for them or to come out at the rally meeting, and they would probably give you t-shirts or maybe a cup or mug, a pen or something like that. And number three, it's official. The answer is nomination day. All right. Once you're nominated, you don't have no time to play. Your aim is to win. And so you're going to work hard at what it is that you're going to do.